this module, I'm super excited to have Cindy Thomason from Profit First for e-commerce sellers here. She's going to be talking to you about how to make sure you pay yourself first and how to really organize your books and your accounts and your bank accounts and everything to have a great chance of success. She's going to give you that discipline that's needed that a lot of e-com sellers are missing. So she's a really sharp lady, so I hope you enjoy what she has to say.
Hi, I'm Cindy Thomason, and I'm the author of this book, Profit First for e-commerce sellers, and it's what I want to talk with you about today. I want to teach you how to take your profit first. Many of my clients come to me and their business has kind of consumed their life. They are out of time, they are out of money, and they're just not sure how to get their business to work for them. They feel like they're a slave to their business and they thought they were buying a ticket to freedom, right? And if we don't have control of our cash from the beginning, then it can get out of hand in a hurry. So the method that I want to teach you today is called Profit First. It's a cash flow management tool, and we're gonna dive in. Now, I know I am tired of watching Zoom videos and watching somebody in a little tiny box and a PowerPoint. So I'm going to make this much more low tech. Here are my slides. We're going to go through this in the next few minutes and give you kind of an overview, and then we can dive deeper in another session. All right, so the method I'm teaching you is called Profit First. There's my book out there that is geared specifically for e-commerce sellers and how to make your e-commerce business give you the profit that you deserve. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of the method. We're going to talk about why, and we're going to talk about how. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about why. The method of Profit First was developed by Mike Michalowicz in the early mid-2000s. He's written a book on it called Profit First, and it's more for a generic audience. But the concepts are really rock solid, and they're based on some economic theories. The first one being Parkinson's law. Now, Parkinson's law quite simply means you use what you got. And I'll give you an illustration of that. I travel a lot, and when I do, I take my little tube of travel toothpaste. And here's my toothbrush, and I put just a little dot on that. If I'm going to be out on the road for a while, I don't use a whole big amount of toothpaste because it's got to last me till I get back home. Whereas when I'm at home and I have a whole full tube of toothpaste, I may use a complete bead of or line of toothpaste on my toothbrush. The mindset is, this is a little tube. It's got to last me when I'm out traveling, so I don't use as much. And the same thing happens to us in all of our resources. If we think we don't have very much money, then we're more frugal and we are more careful about how we spend our money. If we think our money's really coming in well, then we look at that bank balance and we think, it might be time I order this computer, or maybe it's time to take some money out of the business and go do something fun with the family. So Profit First uses this concept of Parkinson's law to work with us, to work with our behavior. Because if that's the way we think about things, then we need to make sure that we're getting accurate signals. Now, when you look at your bank account, how often do you do that? I know when I'm in a live audience, most of the time people say they are in their bank account daily or weekly. By far, the daily is what I see. People log into email and check their bank. And that can work for you, or it can work against you. Again, if you look at that bank balance and it looks really good, then you're starting to put your mind to work at what you can do with that money. Whereas if you're looking at it and it looks tight, then you start thinking, okay, what am I going to do to solve this problem? How am I going to pay my bills? That's how we operate as entrepreneurs. But there is a concern about the way we use that information. When we use one bank account, which is what most people do in business, they have one operating checking account. You might have a savings account, but typically what I see is an operating checking account. All the money comes into that and all the money goes out of that. Parkinson's law is really not working for us in that situation because we're not able to look at that bucket of money or bank balance and really understand what that money is designed for, giving it a purpose, if you will. And that's what we want to do with Profit First. We want to give our money a purpose. So to do that, we simply need a few more bank accounts. Many of you are probably familiar with the envelope system. Maybe your grandmother did it, or maybe you've heard about Dave Ramsey talk about it. This system is very similar to that, except we're going to use bank accounts, and we're going to assign a purpose for each one of those bank accounts. Now, I'm going to start out very simple because when I'm talking to a general audience, I don't know your particular situation. Profit First can get very sophisticated, but I want everybody to start out in a way that you can be successful, and then you can add on and build to it as you get the rhythm and feeling of how it works. All right, so the first concept is Parkinson's law. We use what we got, and in that situation, we need to make our bank accounts work for us, and we're going to do that by having multiple bank accounts. That's one concept. The other concept that I want you to think about is what happens when you put something first in your life. When you have something first in a list, you tend to remember it. If your wife sends you to the grocery store for 2 or 3 things, you probably can remember that. You remember what's first on the list. If your husband sends you to the hardware store and you have a list of 28 things, you might remember the first thing on the list. It's called the primacy effect. We tend to remember the first 1, 2, maybe 3 things that we see. When we start getting 9 or more, we start really losing the ability to remember that. And so what we want to do is make sure that the most important thing is the thing that we pay attention to first. And profit is the reason you're in business. And so we're going to put that where it deserves. And I'm going to explain to you in a minute how we're going to do that. But I want you to understand that profit first, just this whole concept, is the idea that the reason we're in business is to make a profit. And so for that reason, we want to put profit first as we think about how we're going to deploy our cash in our business. So those are the 2 big why pieces of the puzzle that I wanted to tell you about. Now, most of you have heard this concept, and even our profit and loss statements are laid out this way. Sales minus expenses equal profit. This is something that we've seen for years, and we just take it to be fact, when in reality it sets us up to take our profit last, right? It's the very bottom of the equation. When we know from a math perspective, it can work just fine if we take it first, okay? And then what's left is what we're going to use to pay our expenses with. And it sets us up to operate very differently, because when you take your dollars coming in and you set aside money for profits, then you're left with what you have to operate your business on. And this is a very simple mindset shift that once you make it, you'll realize that you can get ahead of this problem of always waiting to see what's left. You can know what your profit's going to be from the very first time you decide to invest in a product. In fact, when we work with our clients, what we do is we help them understand what the cost of those products are with the profit baked in from the very beginning. And then it helps them decide, can they really afford to invest in this product, or is it better to pass on this one because it's not going to give them the return? Okay, so those are the big concepts. We use what we got, and we need to take our profit first. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use bank accounts to help us. So most of you have an operating checking account. And in your operating checking account, all your money comes in and all your money goes out. And we're still going to use that operating checking account, and it's going to operate that same way with two exceptions. I want you to also open an account for inventory and an account for profit. Now, as you get more sophisticated with Profit First and you get these 3 accounts really working well, then there's 2 more accounts that I think would be great for you to have. But I want you to get started and be successful. And to do that, we're going to start very simply with using our operating checking account, where your money's going to come in from Amazon, and then we're going to have 2 other accounts. Again, inventory checking and a profit account, which can be either a checking or a savings account, depending on what you can get at your bank without very many fees, okay? So here's how it's going to work. Here's my fancy graphic. The money is going to come in to your operating expense account from Amazon. Your deposit will happen every couple of weeks typically. Then we're going to move a portion of it into our inventory account. Now, the portion of it will be the replenishment cost to buy again that inventory you just sold. So, for example, you just sold, you just received $10,000 in income from Amazon, but you had to turn around and pay for that with your to your supplier, and that cost you $3,000. So I want you to move immediately, once you get that settlement, $3,000 over into your inventory account. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to set you up to be able to buy your inventory again. Your dollars are already sitting there when you call your supplier and say, I need more, and here's the dollars, okay? Now, inventory is very different than operating expenses. So that's the reason I wanted to get it out of that operating expense bank account as soon as it's cleared the bank. So you'll move the money into this inventory account so you can start to see your cash flow around inventory. Monthly expenses in your operating account tend to happen monthly. You know, they're fairly steady. Your payments to your insurance, if you've got rent, if you maybe are paying a virtual assistant, those things happen on a very steady month-by-month basis. But inventory, as you know, is the lifeblood of the business, and those dollars can go out in very non-uniform ways. So we just can't always predict how much inventory we're going to need, how many dollars we're going to need, how quickly. And so just by setting up a bank account to replenish those dollars, you're going to be ahead of the game when it comes time to order your inventory, and the dollars are sitting there. You're not going to have to worry about, did I accidentally spend it on something else because it was lumped with other things? You're going to know exactly how much money you have to be able to make that down payment or a full payment for inventory. All right, so that's the big change I'm asking you to make. The smaller change is I want you to move out of what's left. So you've got your dollars in, you've put the dollars in your replenishing your inventory account. Of the dollars that are left from your settlement, I want you to put just 1% into profit. And so from the day you do that, the next settlement you get, go get these extra accounts and start doing this. The day you do that, you're going to know you're profitable because you put the money there, okay? And just by making that one shift, you are in front of your business instead of it being out there just taking from you. You're going to put 1% in there. Now, I know you're going to say, because I hear it all the time, 1%, I'm more profitable than that. And that's probably true, and I sure hope so. And if you do know your numbers and can use a higher percentage, go ahead. But don't go much more than 5 until you've got this system worked out. Because what I see happen with our clients, a lot of times they say, my numbers look really good and I'm wanting to go all in. And they're making like a cliff dive into this whole process. When in reality, they may have good profitability numbers, but their cash flow numbers are not as strong as they need them to be. And so we want to take a slower approach, kind of a walk in from the beach, if you will. We're going to get to the same place. We're going to get out to the deep water, but we're going to do it with this beach entry approach where we're learning our cash flow habits and patterns along the way, as opposed to jumping into the deep end and being surprised by something that we just didn't see coming. The biggest reason I see clients fail with Profit First is because they try to do too much too fast. They want to achieve the end goal immediately, and by doing that, they try to put too much money in these accounts from the very beginning. And as I mentioned, there's a whole other set of accounts that you'll want to get to eventually. And when you go, start moving money into 5 and 6 different bank accounts and taking it out of your operating expense account, and you're not prepared to make that next inventory payment, just the timing of it all can make it not work. And then your next step is, well, I got to move that money back. And then you've done that 2 or 3 cycles, and the situation is, I'm just moving money around. I mean, I've heard it. And so I'm encouraging you, don't go crazy. Take this beach entry approach. Do the 3 accounts. Do it for 3 months and get your hands around it. And then you can get into the more sophisticated approach of higher profitability numbers. Maybe take your owner pay and your taxes out as well. There's a whole series of accounts that we recommend, but I don't want you to just go full tilt into it and end up thinking that the system doesn't work because your startup didn't work. Okay, so go slow. All right, so I'm going to say it one more time. These are your bank accounts that you need. You need, probably already have this, a business checking account that we're going to say it's for operating expenses. When the money comes in, we're going to move it to our inventory account. And this inventory account is going to be funded based on replenishing the inventory that we just sold. So when you get your dollars in, you can look back at what your cost of goods sold was for that associated revenue and move that amount into inventory. And then from what you have left, 1% is going to go over to profit. All right, so that's our system. So how often am I going to do this? Well, Amazon makes it easy for most of my clients. They keep the money for 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks is how often you're going to do it. If you're getting your money more frequently than that from Amazon, you could start out doing it weekly, or you could do it every 2 weeks. Ultimately, where I like for my clients to get is every 2 weeks frequency. The money comes in every 2 weeks. We do our allocations to these accounts, and then when my inventory bill comes, I pay it out of that inventory account. When I'm billed for my rent, I pay it out of the OPEX account. And I'm going to talk to you about profit in a minute. So that's the frequency. Every 2 weeks is where you want to get to. If you're taking money out more than that, I suggest you get into a system where once a week you go in and pay attention. When you go in, and I look at my bank account every day, so I get this, but I don't move money that often. I just look at it. And I want you not to move money except either weekly or every other week, because you're going to start to understand some patterns when you do that. If you're moving money constantly, paying bills constantly, then you're never going to understand the cash flow. Cash flow, the flow part's important too. We tend to think about the cash part, but the flow part is important too. And that frequency of how often you actually touch the money and move it is what's going to allow you to understand that flow. Whereas if you do that daily, you're going to have a harder time understanding the patterns of your cash flow. So my recommendation is, don't worry about money every day. I mean, if you want to look at it, fine. But I want you to move the money and allocate to your bank accounts. Get onto a system over time where you're doing that every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks is when you pay your bills as well. So the money is coming into your bank account, and then you're spending that money, and you start to understand how that flows. Now, inventory, of course, is going to be paid based on when you reorder and when they require a deposit or when you owe a balance or whatever. But do that as best you can on your days that you handle money. Many of my clients have Money Monday, and some of them have Thursday days that they do their banking. But pick a day of the week and have that be the day that you work on your banking. And if you want to look at it, fine, but try not to move it all the time. Okay, so we've talked about frequency. Frequency is every 2 weeks or quarterly. Now, here's what happens quarterly. Quarterly is the fun part. Quarterly is when you get to take some of your profits. Now, you've been building up, starting with that 1% into your profit bank account. And when you build up in that profit bank account, the idea is that it's going to be a reward for you once a quarter. And what I recommend for my clients is every quarter, you look at what you added that quarter and you take half of it out and do something for yourself and for your family. Now, if you're saying, oh, it's not going to be much at 1%. Well, it may not be. But the idea is that you're getting into this habit of taking your profit first. I tell my clients, profit is a habit. It's not an event. It's a habit. And so you're going to take your profit distributions, half of what you put in that quarter, you're going to take out. Sometimes it's just enough to go, have a cup of coffee with your VA, or sometimes it's enough to really do something nice. The longer you do this, and as you're able to build up that profit percentage, the more substantial it's going to be. But the idea now, we're taking that beach entry, is to get in the habit of doing it and to not put that money back in the business. I hear this all the time. Well, I just want to plow all the money in because I still got my day job. That's setting your business up to rely on funds that will not be there in the long term. I've seen, especially this year, people having to hire people to do work in their business because of illness, COVID in their family, and they can't keep up, and so they've hired somebody. So you want to be putting that money back and having it available to start to pay you, so that if you end up having to hire someone to take on more, that money is there to support the business in the future. If you're constantly plowing it back in to inventory that may or may not be profitable, then you're setting yourself up to be in a situation where the money is never generating a profit. I mean, the business is never generating a profit. So I want you to get in the habit, putting that money aside and taking it out and doing something for your family. Starting a business is hard. Well, your family knows it too. Do something to celebrate the profit that you made in the quarter. Now, I told you to take out half of it. The other half is going to stay in there. And the reason we keep it in there is for situations that happen. I call them rainy days. We're going to have a rainy day eventually. That rainy day may be, your supplier is slow and you need to start proceeding to buy from another supplier. It may be that the shipping company lost your product, or Amazon did, or maybe you got a suspension. I can just tell you, rainy days happen. And so you want to be in a situation to have a little cash to help you get out of what kind of rainy day situation you find yourself in. So the other half of that profit account is going to stay in there every quarter, and it's going to grow, and it's going to set you up so that you'll have funds to be able to handle a rainy day. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. One, having money available that is not expensive because you're having to borrow it puts you in a situation where you can act quickly, but it also puts you in a situation where you can have time to think, and you can, instead of just constantly being worried about how I'm going to get the money and what I'm going to do, the funds are sitting there. So what is my best course of action? It takes some of the pressure off when we know that the funds are there, and so we're in a situation where we can really think and do what's best for the business instead of panic and having to take a high interest loan or something like that. So that's another reason we want to have a rainy day fund. Now, all the time I hear, well, Profit First, you can't have credit cards with Profit First. And, you know, if you read the original book, he does recommend that you not have credit cards. And it would be great if we if we could all operate like that. But I know in my business where I work with many of my contractors, credit cards are what make the world work. So what I designed in the Profit First for E-commerce book is a way to use credit cards that you can get all the perks from using credit cards and the ease of using credit cards, but you don't set yourself up to be in a situation where there's the dollars aren't there and you're operating behind. So this is how that works. I told you we wanted a operating account, operating expense account, and a inventory account. For each of those accounts, you can get a credit card tied to those accounts, or 2 or 3 if you need it. I know people buying a lot of inventory like to have multiple credit cards tied to their inventory. The idea is that you keep those things separate. Just like we're separating them in the bank account, I recommend that you separate it for your credit cards. So you can always look at your credit card bill and say, okay, I've got $10,000 that I've used on that. Do I have $10,000 in my inventory account to pay that bill? And if you do, then you're not actually operating in a debt situation. You've got the money to cover it. And that's the connection that I think e-commerce sellers can make to know that they're not getting in over their head from debt perspective, that they do have enough money to cover what they're putting on the credit cards. Operating expenses the same way as, it's just easier to operate with a credit card a lot of times. So use that credit card to, buy your software subscription, pay bills that you may have, travel if you have travel. But always know that when you look at your bank account, you've got a greater balance in that bank account that's going to be able to pay that credit card. So that's how we make credit cards work. Okay, I've covered a lot. So here's some key points to wrap up. First of all, Parkinson's law teaches us that we use what we got. So we want to understand what our money is for by putting it in specific bank accounts for a purpose that we can then keep track of. Are we using it for what it's intended for and not going out and spending it on other things and then not have the money when we need it? The second is sales minus profit equals expenses. We want to put profit first in your business so that you start to be rewarded for being a business owner. And by just changing our mindset and realizing that we can put profit first as we make decisions about products that we buy, as we make decisions about money that comes in, that we set ourselves up to be a profitable business from the day we start this process. And so those are the key points of why we do it, the how we do it. I've explained with the bank accounts. And once you get those bank accounts set up and start working, do it for 2 or 3 months. You're going to see the flow in your business much more clearly than you ever have before. And then once you've got that figured out, then you can dive a little bit deeper into how you can make it more sophisticated. I appreciate you being with me and bearing with me in my graphics and my handwriting. And I look forward to talking with you about some of the other aspects of Profit First in the next module.